So the Bitcoin active addresses are skyrocketing today. They're up 22%. Why is this important? How is this previously correlated to the Bitcoin price? That is what we are going to jump in today. Now, first of all, I'm going to start off by adding the BTC USD chart right next to this, so we can literally compare side by side what has happened in previous times when the Bitcoin active addresses skyrocket. So if I add the Binance pair, this should go back far enough and prove my point. So number one, you can see what we need to define what are Bitcoin active addresses. This is a Glassnode chart, and what you'll see is Glassnode defines Bitcoin active addresses as the number of unique Bitcoin active addresses that were active in the network either as a sender or a receiver. Why is this important? Well, if you think about it from a fundamental perspective, what normally happens when you come up to bull market tops? Well, a lot of people want to sell, and it's fairly obvious because the price massively capitulates, so obviously someone has to be selling. And what you actually notice, we're going to do a deep dive into this in a second, but almost every single top on the Bitcoin chart correlates to a spike over in the Bitcoin active addresses. And like I said, why does this make sense? Well, think about it this way. If the Bitcoin price comes all the way up to like 19,000 as it did down here, a lot of people are going to sell. How are they going to sell? They're probably going to send their Bitcoin to an exchange, meaning that their Bitcoin address has now become active. That's how I like to look at it as. And let's jump into the video. So the first top we had on this chart was back here in December of 2017. This happened on the 11th of December. It might have been a few days to the left or the right. I'm looking at this on the weekly time frame to make it easier, but you can see next week, this happened on the 11th, and the exact top on the Bitcoin active addresses was also here on the 11th. Once again, why does this make sense? Because people were probably sending their cryptocurrencies from something like a ledger. Maybe they were holding it in a cold storage wallet other than a ledger, maybe a Trezor, and they were sending it to places like Coinbase or Binance in order to liquidate that crypto for fiat or stable coins. That's why we see the spike in the active addresses. So number one, the active address top was perfectly called over here. Coming over to our next massive spike on the active addresses, this was in July of 2019. It was the 17th of July. This didn't necessarily correlate to like a huge top at this moment in time, but you can actually see that within this general vicinity, over on the Bitcoin price was almost exactly where we topped. So the active addresses started spiking. This was when the price was going up, and the price started to capitulate as the active addresses had spiked because people probably sent their cryptocurrencies to Coinbase or Binance, and then as the price kind of started to consolidate and roll over, that's when people sold their Bitcoin that they sent to an exchange. So once again, another not so massive top that happened on this chart. Now, I'm not too interested in this one. I did just want to talk about the spike though. So moving over onto the next macro peak, and I really want to talk about this peak, and this peak. So let's jump into the next example. You can see, depending on where you want to draw it from, you can argue this was a big peak as well, and I would agree, but this peak was actually the next high, and it is the all-time high for the Bitcoin active addresses. This came into fruition on the 26th of April 2021. And what were we doing on the 26th of April 2021 on the Bitcoin price? Well, we were literally getting ready to have that rollover, and it didn't spike on the exact top. You can see we did have a spike on the day of the active addresses, but as the price started to roll down a little bit and it back tested the previous all-time high, a lot of people sent their Bitcoin to exchanges, probably because they realized we were about to top, and then boom, all the people sold their Bitcoin. The active addresses went down as we capitulated into a bear market because people had already sent their Bitcoin to an exchange to sell. Moving on to the next peak, which was the previous all-time high. Now you can see this doesn't perfectly line up. This came into fruition on the 8th of November, but what actually happened is we topped on the Bitcoin active addresses on the 29th of December. And what happened on the 29th? Well, we had a dinky bounce and then we rolled all the way back down. So, it didn't fit perfectly to the teeth like the other two examples did, but you can definitely see there is a very black and white correlation between the spikes in the active addresses and Bitcoin rolling downhill. Looking at the next peak that we had over on the 21st of March. I'm going to keep this one super simple and just run on to the next example, but you can see we had a pretty decent spike over on the 21st of March in this example, and now what are we seeing once again for the Bitcoin active addresses? They are spiking like crazy now, up 22% today, meaning that addresses that were inactive, for example like my cold storage, it only ever becomes active as a receiver. I do not sell, I do not send my Bitcoin, I only buy it and accumulate it. It's different with altcoins. I'm not, you know, a long-term hodler for altcoins. I think that makes no sense, and I've made a video about why that makes no sense. If you check out my microdosing Bitcoin playlist, I made a video called microdosing the top 25 crypto Bitcoin is king theory, and if you watch that video, you'll understand why, in my opinion at least, and according to the top 25 data that I extrapolated, it doesn't make sense to hodl altcoins over Bitcoin, especially coming into a bear market, which is what I think we are doing at this moment in time. I think we're pretty much in the bear market. I think the bottom is very, very near, but it's interesting to see that the Bitcoin active addresses are once again spiking. What do you think of this? In my opinion, I think this means we're probably about to roll down for one more move to the downside. I need to get rid of the active addresses on this chart. I'm going to move over my macro charts to this browser, but looking at Bitcoin right now, wow, we've massively capitulated. Even in the past hour, I think the last half an hour, I've been making videos for the past half an hour, and yeah, you can see in the past half an hour we've had a massive capitulation because the active addresses are spiking. You can see these go beautifully hand in hand. What happened today? Bitcoin active addresses spiked 22%. What happened on the Bitcoin price? Bitcoin's capitulated about 5% in pretty much the past 4 hours. Because the last 24 hours, you can see it's been pretty flat. This has all come into fruition in the past 4 to 8 hours. So looking pretty brutal. That is the Bitcoin active addresses. Hope you found some value in this content. As always, not financial advice, cowboy out. And let me know what you think down below. Do you think this spike in the active addresses is going to correlate to another push to the downside for Bitcoin? In my opinion, I do think it is, because I've been calling for this move all the way down to 22,000 for quite some period of time now. Best of luck if you're trading these markets. As always, cowboy out. Peace.